We are currently recording into the cloud, Daniel. As I say that, that means some other entity might be capturing this wonderful podcast and altering it. And who knows what is going to be actually recorded. I'm joking. At some point we might get there though with who knows. I shouldn't even say these things. But Daniel Prince, thanks for taking the time. I don't even know what country you're currently in. I think last time I spoke to you a couple of years ago, you were in France. Mm-hmm. Are you still in France?
We are in a different place, but we are still in France. And we have been just to the US, myself and 3 of my kids. We were in Miami for the conference that went down, which was great fun. And you know, it's bittersweet, right? Because to get into that country, I had to buy certain documents on black markets to upgrade my medical kind of documentation. And I just it highlights what a clown world that we live in, that you have to go to such lengths just to cross a freaking border to go and speak at a conference and have incredible conversations with your network, with your friends, with your peers, with your colleagues, with your business partners. Yeah. And the real joke of it all is not at one stage was I asked to present the proof of that particular document. Not once, not by the airline. And I traveled through 3 different airports. I traveled through Toulouse, Frankfurt, Tampa, and into Miami. No checks by any airline, by any border officials. So it's so ridiculous that that country is still on their website forcing or making people to, you know, make a decision.
And is it still, I thought in the last 2 weeks or something, I thought they just dropped, but I guess not. I don't really check, but no.
It hadn't dropped by the time I was due to leave. So
got it. Okay.
So anyway, we had a great time. That was amazing. Being around
I feel like people. You had to get, yeah. So, I wonder where the authority of I wonder, just hearing you say that, because you chose the words to hang out with. I don't know if you said your people or your like the people you were interested in hanging out. It does seem that we're layering on the global society now, the ability to build our own network, tribe, community, whatever you want to call it. And it's kind of overlapping on top of the nation state infrastructure that almost feels archaic at this point. Like, and, you know, some people will argue with that point with me saying we need a tax base and, you know, how else are we going to pay for all these things? And like, I understand all the arguments, but it does seem like we have this weird archaic infrastructure that is being replaced. Like, look at us chatting right now. Like, I would never get a chance to talk to you. We already decided before this that you're never coming to Canada. So I'm joking. Maybe one day, but when would we have an opportunity like this? And it's interesting to see where this heads over the next 10 years. Actually, I want to ask you about that. But before we do that, there's some people who maybe don't know your backstory. And I know you've shared it, but can you just maybe quickly, in 1 or 2 minutes or whatever, just tell everyone how you got to the place where you're sitting in France right now, like starting at the corporate life kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I left school at the age of 19. I did not go to university. I grew up in the southeast of the United Kingdom, very close to London. London was 30 to 50 miles away, and it would take you an hour to commute into London. So I followed my father's footsteps into the financial markets. I was working as a runner, a very low down, like the lowest low of down trainee graduate, straight into the hell pit of foreign exchange spot markets. On the dollar mark desk, where you would be exchanging US dollars for Deutschmarks in tens of millions every second of the day. Watching those guys do that was absolutely incredible, especially for a 19-year-old kid. Like, what the hell is this? You'd been living that insulated, indoctrinated life in the state education system, and then catapulted into a complete new universe. And it was very, very fast moving, really enjoyable, high adrenaline, very hard work, very long hours. I got the opportunity to be moved across to Singapore in 1999, where I spent 15 years in that same arena of business. I was in foreign exchange options, brokering those for banks in Asia, primarily dollar yen or dollar Hong Kong dollar against the Taiwan, against the Chinese renminbi, you name it. It was all going on, all good fun. In back end of 2013, I read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and I was just kicked in the gut by that book because I suddenly came to the realization that I was living a deferred lifestyle. And that really hit home, especially because we'd just been landed with our third and fourth kid. A surprise twin pregnancy took us from 2 to 4. So I was already having like huge questions in my mind, like, okay, what does this mean for life? What does this do for us? This probably means I have to sit in this chair for another 25 instead of the 15 I was hoping. Like, all of this kind of nonsense going around in your mind. And that book, I must have read it at an opportune time because it made me sit up and realize and start thinking in a different way. And by May of 2014, we'd sold pretty much everything we owned. We'd given our keys back to our landlord, and we were off. And we started traveling with the kids long term, with no real plan. We thought we'd be able to last for 9 months. We ended up home swapping our way around the world, and we long term traveled for 2.5 years. Then we were house sitting for about 2 or 3 months over the summer of 2016, I want to say, if I'm right, in France. And we really loved the rural life, the countryside, the beautiful little picturesque medieval towns, the local tobacco, the wonderful bistros, and the pace and the way of life. And we wanted the kids to learn another language, and we figured, well, let's just hang here for a little while. And we've been here ever since, different places, mixed with a bit of travel in between when we weren't locked down. So that's kind of the quick story. And whilst 2017 it was, I started writing the book, and that was when we were just in the countryside and I had a bit of air just to like kind of digest, whoa, what did we just do over the last 2.5 years? Well, I quit a job that had a high paying salary. We took on loads of, risk in other people's eyes, huge amounts of risk. We were irresponsible parents because we were homeschooling, world schooling, unschooling our kids rather than giving them the best education possible in, an indoctrination camp. So I figured I've probably got a little bit to say about this, but I kept a blog running the whole time. But a friend of mine said, you got to write the book, man. Write the book. Like, why wouldn't you do this? Why would you keep this secret? Why wouldn't you help other families that might be thinking about doing the same thing as you? And that was my inspiration to kick up the arse I needed to actually read it, because I thought if one other family picks this book up and it releases their kids from the education system, and it releases the mother or the father or both from their soul-sucking 9-to-5 life that they'd painted themselves into a corner of doing, then it would be worth it. So I started writing, and as soon as my fingers touched the type pad, I couldn't stop, and it just came pouring out. And that's when I hired an editor once I'd got all of it out, and she rejigged it all. My wife then added her thoughts at the end of each paragraph. And I think my daughter, actually, at the time, she must have been about 11. I think she added a paragraph in, packaged it all up, got it looking nice. I used 99 Designs for $100 or something to get the cover, and self-published on Amazon. And since then, I have met people that have been so thankful for me to have written the book, and it has impacted their life and it's changed their life. And that is as much payback as I need.
I think your book is really good. And the full title is Choose Life, the Tools, Tricks, and Hacks. I stopped writing at the word hacks. Do you remember the full?
For long term. For long-term family travelers and world schoolers or digital nomads, something like that.
Thank you. Thank you. I just stopped. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And funnily enough, that the reason that subtitle is so long, and I can't remember whether it was a Tim Ferriss blog or some kind of random analytic said the absolute perfect amount of words for a subtitle is 17. I'm like, huh? Well, someone's done the research, I suppose. So I wrote it down. Yeah. I wrote down what I wanted to get across and counted the words. It was 17. I'm like, all right, I just got, that's it.
The key to success. Yeah. 17 word subtitle. Yeah. Perfect. It was meant to be. Yeah. I thought you were actually going to say search engine optimization, that there was a bunch of good words in there for search engine optimization. It's funny how far, just, you know what, having said that, Daniel, when search engine optimization, I used to study greatly, 2005 to 2009, maybe. And you could actually reverse engineer the algorithms at that point, because you could kind of sort of figure out, you paid for some services, did your own little experimentation. But the algorithms now in 2023 are just so quick to adapt that whole game is just, when people now ask me about trying to rank high in Google, I'm like, oh gosh, that ship has sailed. Like you are, it's interesting just to see how the algorithms have gone from something as simple that you could reverse engineer them to now being next to just impossible. And now with ChatGPT. But anyway, that's sending us down a whole different topic. What I wanted to comment on your book was that I think the reason that your book was a really great read is that in marketing, there's a principle that you always want to enter the conversation going in the mind of your customer. And there are many customers for your book because there are many people walking around the face of the earth thinking, is this it? Is this what I'm destined to do? How do I pay for these kids? How do I get out of the rat race? So like your book is entering the question that is going on in the minds of so many people. So yeah, I thank you for writing it. And I loved reading it. And it's fantastic. So then you chose some words very specifically there. You said that perceived risk of quitting your job, or what some people thought was risky in traveling. What was the biggest risk, and how have you handled it, or did not come to fruition? Because when I look at you, I would say probably if it was me, it would be running out of money. Mm-hmm. Like that's going to be like the biggest. I know there's maybe kids' education, like you talked about, and all these other things that are perceived risk in some people's mind, but maybe just money. Was that the biggest risk that you felt when you were first going down this path, or no?
Absolutely. And there's a fine line between risk and fear, because fear is what, that fogs your mind. Even when you're trying to do real risk analysis and try and do that with an open mind, it's very difficult because of the fear that comes with that. And my biggest fear was going bankrupt and failing my family and living under a bridge, the six of us under cardboard. And actually, I remember this was in Ferriss's book, the 4 Hour Work Week, that he talks about instead of doing goal setting, you should do fear setting exercises. And we're all used to goal setting exercises, right? Hit the moonshot, list them, put them on the mirror next to your where you clean your teeth so you can read that list every morning. Totally. All of this kind of stuff, right? Yeah. And we might have all done that. And I did, and maybe it helped. Who knows? But writing things down definitely helps. Making lists definitely helps. But then this idea of doing a fear setting exercise kind of resonated. And he gave some examples in the book, and I give examples in my book as well. I just list down my biggest fears because I did the exercise. Okay, what is it? Number 1, going bankrupt. Okay. That's a bit of a non-starter then, right? Well, then we're clearly going to go bankrupt because I will be unemployed and I'm walking away, shunning this business, and I'll probably be unemployable again. So screw that up. Straight back to your desk. Stop dreaming. This is what stops so many of us. And this is what I probably had done in my own mind countless times before. But then when you're faced with it on the paper, and then the exercise is write down the 3 things that you would have to put in place to reverse that situation. So going bankrupt and living under a bridge, right? So how do I stop us going bankrupt? Well, I'm going to have to take a very close, stern look at how do I store the value of the money that I have managed to make in the past. I had savings. How do I look at that differently? What do I need to put in place? Who do I need to speak to? You can probably eke that out longer than you think. Living under a bridge, going homeless. Okay, what would I actually do? Well, I'd probably pick the phone up to either my mum or dad, or my wife's mum or dad, or my two brothers, or my wife's two brothers, who between them have about 6 or 7 houses and countless bedrooms. Okay, yeah, fixed. So you start seeing how irrational your fear is when you can actually just write it down in front of you. And that is what I started doing. And I urge anybody else to do it that's listening, that is stuck and thinking to themselves, how have I painted myself into this career? This had nothing to do with what I studied at university. This had nothing to do with my past, my family's past. How am I here? How am I working 9 to 5? I mean, no one does that anymore. How am I working 8 to 8 and then flipping open the laptop on my lap at home, on my couch, in my leisure time, answering emails just to get up at 6 a.m. to get into the office to do all this same shit again? How the fuck did I get here? Nobody's happy with that. And it's too difficult, and it takes up too much energy and brain power to question it when you are on that wheel, that hamster wheel. You cannot get off it. To take a breath just to think for yourself. So for those people that feel that and want something different, I would urge you to list those fears, and then more importantly, write down the steps that you would take if that fear ever did come to fruition, which they generally don't. So, because you are a capable freaking human being, right? So, as soon as you feel that kind of that pressure is that, oh, I'm going to go bankrupt. Well, what do? You get creative. You figure something else out. You reach out into your network. You find a way to make money. There's so much more out there just to compared to just sitting there and living, not even living, going through the motions of
it's like you're slowly dying.
Yeah. It's
whenever my brother and I, we started this business together, whenever we feel too comfortable, we get scared because we're like, oh shit. We're like, we need to throw up some tables upside down or cause some chaos somewhere, because we just know now from experience that like, that's not a good place. Comfort is shit. It sounds horrible. It sounds horrible. It's funny. Both my kids, my son's here and my daughter has been helping us out with some stuff recently. And I was telling someone else in the office, listen, when they come in here, I want them to suffer. I want them to suffer. Like I want stress on them. I want them to be able to handle stuff. Let's not make life too easy. And I think sometimes, maybe especially in a country like Canada, it's pretty easy to get yourself in a comfortable position. Then 10, 20, 30 years goes by and you're like, what the hell happened? So when you're sitting there, you have a unique perspective because now you're in France, you're moved around a little bit. You look back on some friends or your previous life. What do you want to scream out from the top of the hills and tell them to look at, whether it comes from, I had a list that I kind of went through on any topic that comes to mind. Like what do you want them to be aware of right now that maybe they're not paying attention to?
Oh, all of it, man.
I know
that is a deep
because you're deep down. You've gone deep down the road. It's funny because I first saw you. The first time I saw your name, I guess ever, would have been in 2020 when I joined Saifedean's. I jumped on 2 or 3 of Saifedean's economics classes online, and I saw you on there. And I remember I couldn't get my head around deflation. And I asked, like, what, looking back, was the most embarrassing question to someone like Saifedean at the time. I'm like, well, if prices go down, how can that work? or so, just something like basic, you know? And I was like, to me, it was this very like perplexing thing, you know? And I think, and he gave an answer, and I feel like he was probably feeling sorry for me. Like, oh my gosh, you're so far behind. You need to you have a lot to read. You have a lot to figure out. But, that was when I saw your name on there. So you went down the rabbit hole in a lot of different things. Yeah. What do you want to share with somebody who back home, some of your friends, what comes to mind? Something that you
how
just feel
how
like
deep do you want to go here? I would love for people, there's a book that I've just read, and considering how long I've been studying monetary history, monetary policy, my goodness, I had an 18-year career in money, in air quotes, in foreign exchange. And I just read a book called The Secrets of the Federal Reserve by Eustace Mullins. And I can't believe I hadn't found or been told about this book sooner. I already read The Creature from Jekyll Island and thought that was an incredible book. But,
okay, yeah. So why is this book different? Because I think I saw you mention it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. So Edward Griffin wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, I think in the 90s. And I think he must have been leaning a lot on Eustace Mullins' work as well. But Mullins wrote his book back in the 40s. So for me, I'm already like, whoa, okay, I want to read that book that came from the 1940s in a period where it was much closer to the formation of the Federal Reserve, which happened in 1913, because a lot of those key players would have still been alive, and he would have not had direct access to them, but there would have been a lot more written in the press about them. And
it was still fresh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is what he did. He studied at the Congressional Library. What do they call it over in the States? The National Library of Congress or something.
Yeah, and you're on the right track. We get the gist.
And he was going through, there's no internet, as you know, but it's like microfilms or microfiches or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And magazines and newspaper cuttings. And more importantly, minutes from meetings that had taken place at the FOMC and inside the Federal Reserve and at congressional hearings. And he just tied all of this together and put the pieces of the puzzle together. What interested me even more about the book was he in his introduction, he talks about how he wanted to be a fictional writer. He wanted to be a novelist. But his mentor, who was Ezra Pound, who was interned at the time for 13 years without trial in a Washington medical institution, he told Mullins, look into the Federal Reserve and write a story as if it were fiction, because it might as well be, as if it were a novel, as if it were a detective kind of story, and then approach the work from that way. So he took like the actual real data points and the research points and the minutes, like I was telling you from the meetings, and he put all that together and weaved it into a story. So you can read all of that, but it not be just dry, numbers and quotes and stuff like that. And it really started aligning the dots for me of how easy it is to socially engineer people when you can completely manipulate and force them to use the medium of exchange of your choosing. And then you have complete power over what to do with that medium of exchange. And then you get into anthropological studies, and you come up against things like, our species is the only species on the planet that has evolved into a civilization because and only because of our ability to use a medium of exchange, to agree upon a medium of exchange, to express and communicate value to each other. And that starts blowing your mind. And when you realize, oh, that got captured in 1913, and this bunch of people have then been running our lives and socially engineering us via the interest rate, which they change on a whim whenever they want, and by the ability to tell us what currency to use. It's the US dollar over there, or Canadian dollar for you guys. It was the British pound over here in the UK. And like I said, when I joined the markets in 1995, it was the Deutschmark in Germany. It was the franc in France. It was the lira in Italy. It was the peseta. All gone, man. All forced by a monopoly to change the medium of exchange that they had all been using to store their value and their time for their hard work and their energy, all forced to convert that now into the euro under the guise of it's better for you, which is truly despicable, because now what you have is a monopoly over God knows how many tens, hundreds of millions of people in Europe. And in the US, it's even worse because that is the world's global reserve currency. So what does that mean for people that might not be familiar with that? Let's say Spain buy some kind of goods, oil from Canada. That transaction would have to be done in US dollars. So it can't be like, I'm going to send you euros and you can convert that to Canadian dollars. No, it's got to be settled as a commodity in US dollars. So they have the complete power now to control and socially engineer us as people by manipulating that money. And what are they doing at the moment? Just printing way, way more money into the system. And every time they do that, that devalues the purchasing power of the dollars or the pounds or the euros or the yen, whatever it is that you've worked for in the past, now loses purchasing power because there is more in circulation. It's the same that would happen with a Pokemon card, for example. You've got one of those nice, shiny, beautiful silver Pokemon cards that my son holds up on high esteem. If they decide tomorrow to print another 1 billion of those into circulation, the one that he's got sitting up there becomes less. The purchasing power becomes less. He will be able to swap for one other normal card now rather than 5 other normal cards because of the inflation that happened. And that is the true definition of inflation. So that book helped me piece all these things together. Saifedean helped me piece all of these things together.
Sorry, right on that book note, that note of the book, though, I'm curious because The Creature from Jekyll Island read like a mystery novel to me. Like I couldn't put it down. Like when I was reading The Creature from Jekyll Island, I was like, it was like my world was exploding. It connected a lot of dots, but you're saying this particular book did it a little even more. It did it a bit better because it was in a story narrative.
It's just hands down better and really? A lot shorter.
Sorry, what was the name one more time?
The Secrets of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. And then you, in that book, you're saying, which is what I talk about a lot, you talk about a lot, but you're saying because the medium of exchange was captured, that in and of itself was enough to really control large masses of the population. The capture of the medium exchange. Okay. So then I have something for you. I know you're into Bitcoin, obviously. I like Bitcoin. But then we're like, okay, well, screw it, Daniel. Bitcoin's going nowhere because the medium exchange is going to continue to be captured. The US dollar is going to continue. It's going to get, by law, you'll go to prison if you don't use the US dollar, Daniel. So your whole Bitcoin thing, sorry, it's over. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, it's true. You will still have to use US dollars to pay your local or federal taxes. And that's why you're going to have to be able to get some of those US dollars. So you're not able to go on a complete Bitcoin standard that you would want to just yet. And of course, not enough merchants are accepting Bitcoin as a unit of account on their balance sheet. Hopefully over time that will change. Well, there's no hopefully. Over time that will change. So at the moment, many of us that have been saving in Bitcoin are in this kind of situation where we do have to find a way when we do need to interact with the fiat world and pay our bills and pay our rent and do our shopping and pay our taxes and whatever else it is, you need that off-ramp into US dollars or your local currency. Can the government completely ban Bitcoin? No. I mean, they can try, but has a government ever succeeded in completely banning anything before? I can't think of any examples. And in fact, it's classic. What's it called? The Cobra effect. When government get involved,
something's banned.
Yeah. Yeah,
it becomes more desirable. I don't know if that's the Cobra effect, but in my understanding, what you're saying is something gets banned, you actually want it more.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just used some words there that I just want to dig into a little bit. You said, currently vendors aren't, not a lot of vendors or vendors you deal with are accepting Bitcoin as medium of exchange. And then you said, hopefully that will change. Then you corrected yourself and you said, no, that will change. Why did you correct yourself there? Like, why are you saying that will change?
Because I truly believe that Bitcoin is inevitable. And when people come to that realization, it's not long before they start saving their time and energy in Bitcoin as well. So over time, as people listening to this show, for example, this could be first, second, third, fourth, or fifth touch point to one of your listeners of, here's another crazy dude talking about Bitcoin. How's he talking about Bitcoin? And actually, it doesn't seem that crazy.
English guy living in France talking about Bitcoin. Like, it's just not adding up.
And why do I keep seeing articles about Bitcoin? And why is it now I go on Amazon and I type in the word Bitcoin, there's God knows how many books when there used to be none.
Yeah, good point.
Why are there hundreds of podcasts when 5 years ago there were a handful? Why are there God knows how many YouTube channels talking about Bitcoin when 5 years ago there were none? Well, these things, they all have their network effect. And when people do start to realize that, it's not dead, even though the mainstream media has told me about 10 to 13 times that Bitcoin is dead. So you start seeing the inconsistencies of the mainstream messaging, and then you weigh that up to the consistencies of the Bitcoin educators and how they're able to express the knowledge that they've learned in a meaningful way and understandable manner. And you start naturally, people just will tend to the truth rather than the gaslighting or the lies. And Bitcoin is truth. When you compare the monies, well, you can't. They're apples and oranges. One is a currency, one's a fiat currency. Let's use a Canadian dollar. That's a fiat currency. Bitcoin is a commodity money. They are completely different things. And for those people that might not understand exactly what that means, so fiat just is Latin for the word, for the term by decree or by order of. So by order of us, you will use the Canadian US dollar, and we will put a pretty picture of our president and whoever else on it, and probably the maple leaf as well, just to make it look nice and fancy and give you
maybe the queen.
Fuzzy...
Oh no, the king. Sorry.
Of course.
Maybe
you're
we'll
going to get the king on this. Absolutely. And that is what you are forced to use to buy your groceries, to buy your needs for your family, your fuel, absolutely everything. And you need to pay us taxes in it as well. Whereas a commodity money like gold or silver, which is a commodity, such as Bitcoin is a commodity money, that is a property of people storing more faith and more value in the commodity money rather than the fiat currency. People will naturally tend towards the hardest money, the better medium of exchange, the one that was going to hold its value over time. So you've got on one side the fiat currency that is being printed into oblivion. I think Canada are probably leading the charge.
We're very good at it. We are very good at that. Hockey and printing dollars.
Hockey and printing dollars.
Come and talk to us.
There you have it. Whereas on the side of Bitcoin here, the commodity money, and it's a commodity because of the way that it's distributed via the, in air quotes, mining, which is a bad terminology. for the issuance schedule of Bitcoin. So we know the issuance schedule of Bitcoin. Every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoin are released, rewarded, to the mining company or the mining pool that has validated the latest block. They get 6.25 Bitcoin. Then 10 minutes later, somebody else gets 6.25 Bitcoin. 10 minutes later, and on we go. This gets halved in May of next year. That will go to 3.125, and then it gets halved 4 years later. So we know the issuance schedule of Bitcoin down to the minute. Down to the last Bitcoin is going to be mined into the system in May 2140.
And you're hitting on I didn't understand that Bitcoin had a limit and that it had this kind of schedule of a release. The reason Bitcoin is so important to the economy, and the reason I think you always talk about it, or I always talk about it, is that in the middle of every single transaction, there is money. And when we use a form of money that the government can change the value of based on interest rates, it would be like an architect or an engineer changing how long a meter is and then trying to build a house.
Yep.
Because if a meter in the blueprint is one length, but then when you go to actually build the house, the meter changes, you're going to build a foundation that's all wobbly. And I think I like to try to use that as an example to explain to people who are just coming to the realization that Bitcoin's something that important, is that if you change the value of money constantly through interest rates, you can't build an economy that is signaling clear and concise information about the value of all the different interactions in the economy, because the money itself, the thing that's in the middle of all the goods and services, is always changing in value. So the whole economy gets distorted. Whereas Bitcoin is pure truth, in that the information quality that you get from it is clear. Mm-hmm. And I know that might sound weird, Daniel, but helps me understand the importance of it. It stabilizes the economy. It is not volatile. I tried to explain this to a friend the other day. They're like, well, good luck with that Bitcoin. How's that going? I'm like, oh my gosh, you're measuring it in dollars.
Yeah.
Bitcoin hasn't changed. It's the same amount of Bitcoin that's out there. There's a schedule of its release, and it's the exact same. If the price was high, it's not a reflection of Bitcoin. Bitcoin hasn't changed. It's your dollars that are changing in weird ways and being reflected in the dollar price of Bitcoin. Yep. But I know that conversation starts, and I was there at one point as well. I thought Bitcoin was going to die in 2017. I was a big gold guy. And I thought Bitcoin was going to die. And I remember checking the price at some point in 2017 after the peak. And I assumed it was going to be zero or like really close, like pennies. And I remember checking the price one day, and it was like, it was either 4,500 or 6,500. And I remember thinking, like, when you have one of those moments, you're like, oh, like I thought it was that, like, how is it still even that much? And then I went away and discounted it because I thought I was too smart for it. When you also have those moments, you're like, oh yeah. So like dismiss. At one point, I think Nick and my brother were like, we'll just start the Rockstar coin. How about that, you Bitcoiners? We'll just start the Rockstar coin. What are you going to do then? You know what I mean? When you don't fully grasp a concept. And but that was one of the moments that, to your point on how many books there are and how many videos there are right now, that was one of the moments where it was like, wow, this thing's really not kind of disappearing. Okay, so we started on this by me asking you, what would you like to tell some friends or family or anyone, of this journey you've been on? And it's interesting that you chose this. So you didn't talk about education or media, or you chose money. And it's obviously because it's so important to living a free life.
Because
in all
it touches
our
everything.
lives. Like
you said, it touches everything. It's 50% of every transaction. And fix the money, fix the world. That's a meme in Bitcoin that we say, and what we truly believe is, if we can fix the money, then we will fix the world. It's not going to happen in a click. It's not going to happen overnight. But like you said, brilliant analogy. You cannot build something if somebody is changing the unit of account, like of a meter. Like if someone's now all of a sudden, no, a meter's 1 meter, 10 centimeters. It's 110 centimeters. Like what you've just built is now completely irregular. Doesn't
crooked.
Work. Crooked, and it's going to fall down. The same thing with your money. You cannot build. You cannot build for your future. You cannot build your family, your life, the foundations of your life. You cannot build on a stable base, because the future, as we all know, is so. No one can predict it. It's completely unpredictable. So what do you need to weather that storm? is you need a foundation. And if that foundation is fiat currency, man, like that's why we're all so miserable. That's why we're still running 1,000 miles an hour at the age of 55 in that corporate life, with just stay another 5 years, Jeff, and you'll get that gold type in. Like, this is absolute complete nonsense.
Type in.
If he had been able to have saved his time and his energy that he had given up to perform the tasks that he was performing, however mundane they were or however important they were, it doesn't matter. If you are being rewarded in a unit of in a money, in a currency whose unit of account is constantly being changed and manipulated, you are never ever going to be able to build.
Okay, let's play a little game then. The topic of CBDCs, if anyone listening is not familiar, it just stands for central bank digital currency. Let's play a game on where do you think the next step evolves to? Because it feels obvious to me that Bitcoin's in its store of value phase and hopefully going towards its medium of exchange, whereas, transitions from a store of value to more and more people beginning to use it as a medium of exchange. I'm not even fully convinced we need to go there. Maybe it just becomes the best store of value of all time and it's a savings account and the fiat dollars become your spending account. Like, I don't know, maybe that's the world we live in. Who knows? But if it goes from store of value to medium of exchange, where, wow, it's stored its value for a long time. Now let's start using it because people believe in it because of it's proven as a store of value. And then eventually to a unit of account where people just start pricing things in Bitcoin because it's so prevalent and it's everywhere. I do think we're kind of on that transition phase and it's an interesting time in history. But let's talk about the pushback that the governments or the existing power base would want to push back and how they would implement a central bank digital currency. What do you think? Like, just play a game here. Like, how do you think they roll this out? Like, what do we see next in Europe, globally, in the US? What do you think? Prepare us for our future. Prepare us for our future.
Heavy gaslighting. So it's coming. They're not even hiding it. They're announcing, Christine Lagarde over here, who heads up the European Central Bank, has already said central bank digital coins are coming, and it will be a much better system, and we need to upgrade the system, and the system is broken. This is all part of the great reset that just gets bandied around, that great meme from the World Economic Forum. And the same in the US and the same in Canada, everywhere. A central bank digital coin is going to be rolled out in one way, shape, or form. And the one way I think they will start attacking it is via social welfare, social universal basic income checks. And the narrative will be along the lines of, due to forces out of our control, blah, 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 there's a new emergency and we've got to reset the currency. And don't worry, it's debt jubilee for everybody, which it never is. Then what we're going to do is roll out the central bank digital currency. You're going to have to download an app on your phone. It's going to be Fedcoin or, oh God, in the UK, they're going to come up with Britcoin. Could you believe that?
Has that name been tossed around already?
By the Bank of England. Yeah.
Oh, has it? Okay, I missed it.
Oh my God.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, Britcoin.
Yeah. So download the Bank of England app and you're going to have a Britcoin account and we're going to link it to or Canada coin, whatever you want to call it. Link it to your bank account. And for the first 6 weeks of this, you can exchange it at for every $1, you'll get 1.5 Canada coin or something. And going forward, all social welfare, if anybody's receiving any kind of benefits for whatever, even food stamps, whatever schemes they run, we're only awarding those now in the local CBDC, the national CBDC, excuse me. So if you're receiving $1,000 a month in aid for education or health or whatever, that will now come through on the app. That's the only way you're going to get it. And this is the way that they will start onboarding people, because you go to those who are most fearful first. Who are the most fearful? The poorer people, So how do you make them poorer? By gaslighting them into believing that they're going to become poorer if they don't switch their money into the central bank digital coin. That's, I think, how they're going to start rolling it out. But that's just a theory.
No, sure. So, okay, they come out with the app, they release this stuff. You want your universal basic income or your benefits, you must get the app. It's beautiful for adoption of the app because the app just becomes a mandatory thing you must get.
Yep.
Then you can get your CBDC in whatever national version. It's all the same, like a, equivalent of a different fiat dollar kind of thing. But they're going to then, do you think the commercial banks just push back on that and say, oh, no, you got to go through us for this? Because the commercial banks, like in Canada, we have some really we have a smaller amount of banks than the US. I'm not sure compared to the UK, but we have like 5 or 6 really big, powerful banks. Do you think they're just like, no, listen, yeah, you can do this, but it's going to go through us and you'll have the TD Bank version of the app with the CBDC. Otherwise, they're going to upset a lot of their commercial banks. No? Do you think they tie the commercial banks in some way that we haven't discussed yet?
They'll end up just towing the line. The only reason these banks exist in the first place is because they are licensed by the Canadian Central Bank.
Yeah, they have
the Bank of England. Yeah, the Bank of England license NatWest, Barclays, HSBC, all of those banks. The same in the US. The Federal Reserve license it. So if you're not going to play along, if you don't like my idea of the CBDC, then we just find a reason to take away your license, and then you're bankrupt and you're out of business. Or like you say, you just tie that there'll be a tie-in. The CBDCs there'll be some kind of fee, maybe conversion when you're converting your bank deposit into the CBDC. There'll be some kind of nice little earner for the bank there that's promoting this idea, because they'll have to get everybody on side. And if the commercial banks are on side as well, I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to think that the commercial banks are working in free markets and competing against each other for your business. The reality is they're just extensions of your central bank, and they're all part of the same cartel. I would love to see free open markets in banking arise again. But like I said, the only way you can offer banking services to people, any kind of financial services to people, is if you get the green light by that entity that issues those licenses. And if you don't have that, you can't operate. You just go to jail if found that you are operating without that license. But if you do want that license, then you have to play by their rules and join their fun little club.
It's amazing that you can open up almost any business you want, but if you try to open up a bank, you have to kind of beg for this approval, and no one really questions it. Like, what's the deal?
And this is what Caitlin Long is going up against in the US. She's been trying to open a bank called Custodia Bank, which would be a Bitcoin native bank offering banking services to Bitcoiners, whether that's deposit accounts, whether that's loan accounts, you name it, just a normal service that any other bank would operate under with fiat deposits, currency deposits. Can she get a license? No. Has she done everything that the Federal Reserve has asked her? Yes. They've got a stack of paperwork this thick. And she was given a speech about this at the conference just last week in Miami. And she's losing her mind. We keep giving them exactly what they need. But then another regulation point comes up, and then another, and then another, and then another, and all of these stalling tactics, because they will never, ever give her the license. And when you read The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, you will understand why.
Okay, let's just flip the switch to a very sunny, positive topic here. Yep. What has been some of the greatest stuff of going through this adventure? Like, how are your kids doing right now? Yep. This is normal life to them. I mean, you're living in France. This is normal. What are some of the things that maybe you were scared of with the children that have not come to fruition, or some things that have the challenges that have? Can you share with us, just for someone not have gone through what you and your family have? Can you share us some insight maybe around the kids and the family unit?
Absolutely, because the most talked about topic with our friends and family was, your you're going to damage your kids by taking them out of school. And that is the prevailing kind of
I love the look on your
narrative.
face when you said that.
It's like, hang on a minute. Did you not listen? I just told you we're taking the kids out of school and we're going to take them around the world and show them as much as we can and do as much as we can and layer on top of that as much learning experiential touch points that we can. No. They'll never be able to socialize. The classic FUD from people that are first learning about not going to school. And you're like, okay, why do you believe school is a sociable place in the first place? Like, let's actually stop and think about that. What makes you think that is a sociable environment when you are frog marched there at the age of 5, walked through a door, you walk one way, your mother walks the other way, then they lock the barrier between you and may even have a guard on it. And then you're frog marched into a classroom with 29 strangers who have been assigned to each other alphabetically by some faceless algo. There's not much social interaction going on just yet, from what I can see.
No, sorry, you're sharing this and this is now me reflecting on what kind of father I am. At kindergarten, my daughter wouldn't let go of me. So the teachers like grabbed her hands and she was grabbing the fence and they told me to walk away and I walked away. She was screaming and crying. I like to think that I've done other things to educate her about the world and money and finances and life that I've made up for those points that I lost in that experience, Daniel. Okay. Yeah. But I am one of those people that went through what you're just describing. I had never heard the term frog marched until today, by the way. So I don't know if that's a British thing or what, but I like the frog marching. But yeah, that's what we are all just kind of trained to believe. So you're reflecting back, I guess, laughing on it. Yeah.
It tears me up. It tears me up to think that people believe that's good for kids. We've been told how many times have you heard it? Oh, it's good for them. It's good for them, to get them out of the family and running around with kids of their own age. It's like the kid's crying. It's crying. It's looking at me. It's crying. It doesn't want me to go. But me walking away is good for it. Yeah. It's good for it. Don't worry. Like, it'd be fine. It'll stop crying in about 10 minutes. It's fine. And I saw this actually with a kid that was still like 11 years of age. Each morning he would cry when his mother would, like, this is a psychologically damaged child. And this would have happened from the age of 3, where they do start in the school here. And I've had Naomi Fisher on my podcast talking about this, and she's a child psychologist. And she talks about it like so clearly, and I could never do as good a job as her as getting this point across.
What was the conclusion of what you said then around this?
Why are we doing this to kids? Why? Why have we been completely gaslit into believing that it is the only way for them to be able to be educated is to be ripped away from the family and put into a classroom with 29 other strangers and listen to a flapping head at the front of the room for 8 hours a day doing low-grade clerical work? This absolutely makes no sense at all. And then you go down the rabbit hole of, oh, well, they'll never have, they won't learn anything. Like, what's going on there isn't learning. What's going on there is teaching. There's a definitive difference between teaching and learning. Learning is something that happens naturally. Learning is something that happens when you apply yourself to something because you find it interesting and it's voluntary. Teaching is sit down, shut up, turn to page 9 and parrot after me. Little Johnny, stop messing around, go stand in the corner. There's a huge divide between education, the definition of education in those two examples. But our education system is insidiously designed to systematically beat out of you your will, your creativity, your spark, your drive, your desire, your passion. It's not there to celebrate the individual. It's there to destroy the individual. And so that is exactly what's going on.
So how does this change then? And it seems especially, strange now with things like artificial intelligence that are coming out. And, I'm sure you've played around or at least heard of the Chat GPT stuff. I mean, I see essays being written that are being, submitted to different universities. Professors don't know what's going on. The schools, even in the workplace and jobs and stuff, it's really made things that weren't efficient before so efficient. Even in our business, we're using it. Our marketing manager uses it daily, multiple times, Chat GPT. So like if you've kind of given the, money some thought, you're just thinking education at some point, it just loses its purpose entirely the way it's structured right now. There's no need for it. Does it naturally dissolve itself? I don't think so. This feels like it's going to hang on forever to me.
No, the same people that control the money control the education system, control the pharmaceutical companies, control the agricultural complex. That was the coup d'etat of the 20th century, monopolizing each one of these areas and using the education system to indoctrinate us and to keep. John Taylor Gatto writes, John Taylor Gatto is the man to read. He's got several books on it. He was a state school teacher for 30 years before.
Okay. And I think this is who you were just tweeting about some stuff today or recently, right? Yes. About him? Okay. Yep. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about him? Sorry, I'm cutting you off.
Yeah, no problem. He won Teacher of the Year 2 or 3 times in New York State. And after 30 years of working in state schools, suddenly woke up to the fact he didn't want to harm kids anymore because he'd had that epiphany that, oh shit, what I'm doing, what I've been trained to do is to actually socially engineer and dumb down, in effect, people rather than lift them up and help them individually become creative. And so I went down this rabbit hole very quickly when we doing the research before we did go on the travel and pull our kids out of school. It's like, well, what are we going to do here? And I found a friend of mine sent me a link to Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk called "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" And Sir Ken himself was from academia and a professor and delivered that talk in 2006. And so when we were looking at it in 2014, it was even more poignant. It's like, wow, everything he's saying here is just, he's nailing every point. And here we are, we're late to this video. We're 8 years late to this video and nothing has changed. In fact, it's even got worse. And now when you look at it in 2023, and if you watch that talk from 2006, it's going to make your head spin because what is going on? What is going on is creativity is being squashed and it is completely destroyed. And the formation of just minions that are easily led and will comply and have a belief that they have no idea who they are. That's the thing. We all left school. You're an entrepreneur. You found what it was. You found your thing. Most people have no idea who the hell they are because they left school. Then they went to the college, then they went to the university, then they did the PhD, then they went to that job and they're still there. None of that is you because all of it has been engineered for you since the age of 5. And what I hope to see is more people freed from this system. If we can have more people able to think for themselves, to have the time to figure out who they are, to have the time to lay in the grass and look at the clouds, to have the time to write the music or play that instrument or play that sport or read those books or write those
give their true gift to the world.
Exactly that. Which is completely missing in our society today.
And when you roll it back, it goes to what you talked about earlier. When you control the medium of exchange, you control so much.
Yep.
Because what you said is that you wish for people to have the time to do these things. And when you control that medium of exchange and you change the value of it, I almost feel for some people because they don't have time. They're
don't
trying
have
to pay the
time.
rent, and they're trying to pay the rent and buy the groceries. And it's like, Daniel,
Both parents
hey
are
man,
working, right? Both parents are
Yeah.
working. Why are both parents working? Because you don't have the savings, because the
Mhm.
savings have been whittled away by the people that control and manipulate the fiat currency you have been forced to use.
and that's why you believe Bitcoin offers some hope to all of us, is that it has the ability to really flip the game and give us our time and energy can be stored in a way that doesn't get abused and manipulated and devalued, so that we can all have some more time in our lives. See, I'm trying to
Precisely.
bring it back. I'm trying to end with this positive. I'm trying to end with this positive thing. I'm just joking.
Precisely
I mean,
that.
it's yeah.
Bitcoin is hope. That is not a meme. Go to hope.com. That was created by Michael Saylor.
Yeah.
And what a great resource for people to go and start looking and finding interviews and books.
Yes. Do you have a few more minutes? We're over the time I thought I had put.
Yeah, go for it.
I wanted to ask you this. Do you think then in our lifetime, you will see Bitcoin have enough of an impact that will satisfy you? So not that it won't have an impact. Will it have enough of an impact that it will satisfy Daniel Prince in your lifetime?
It already has. The things that have already happened, the change I felt it make in my life, in my persona, the effect it's had on other people I've met, the positive effect it's had on our whole family because of the way it's rewired my brain. I don't have to. I used to sit up, God knows how long, just watching stock markets, like in a crazy frenzy, like what am I going to do now? Like, this is up, this is down. Yeah. Just trying to guess, and it's a complete guessing game. I don't need to do that anymore. And the change in my behavior, my thinking, my personality is a positive trickle down effect, and my family will feel it and people around me will feel it. And if everybody can experience that, and they will, once they start learning about Bitcoin, that is how we start growing a much more cohesive community. And all of this kind of cancel culture and Karening behavior slowly goes away over time. If we can get everybody able to save their time and energy in an unconfiscatable and immutable unit.
Permissionless.
Yeah. Exactly. Permissionless is a big one. You don't need to go and sign up an account with Bitcoin Inc. There
get
is
approval.
No, no, you can just get, you probably go and open a brokerage account somewhere. People are used to doing that anyway. And you can start buying through an exchange, or you can just Google Bitcoin meetups. Go and find a Bitcoin
in
meetup.
Canada. Actually, there's one great thing on this note. I don't know if you follow Bull Bitcoin in Canada.
Yeah.
You can go to any post office here in Canada, and
That's right.
up to $1,000 at a time, you can hand it over the cash, and you will get Bitcoin. You will get the cash deposited at Bull Bitcoin, and then you can buy Bitcoin. You don't have to even put your name into the account.
Yep.
This is actually a very beautiful thing. And in a way to buy Bitcoin in Canada, I got to commend Bull Bitcoin. I wasn't really too familiar with their services, but that one got my attention for sure.
That is the best way in for anybody listening. If that's your first touch point, take $100 to the post office, ask to buy some Bitcoin, start figuring out what it is, figure out how to interact with it, take it very slowly. Do that once a week over the next 50 weeks with what you can afford. And if you're using cash, you're not tied to any exchange. It's completely anonymous. You own it. Nobody can freeze your account, which apparently they're very fond of doing in Canada. And you can.
We're good at that too. Oh my gosh, Daniel, jeez. I'm curious. I have to actually wrap up myself now here in a minute. But now I'm curious. You said it changed. Like for me, Bitcoin has been really comforting in that it's given me peace of mind when you see all these banking crises going off in the States and in the Europe and Credit Suisse and all this stuff, and it's just giving me this peace of mind where I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but my Bitcoin is my Bitcoin, and you're not going to mess with that. So it's given me a very comfortable, like this just peace of mind that I can't explain. And I really, really appreciate that as just one of the many aspects of it that I really value. How has it changed you mentioned it changed you. In what way comes to mind when I say that? Did it change you? Exactly
the same as you. A much greater peace of mind. Just being able to slow down to think. You're able to think a lot clearer because you do have that store of value under your belt. And a lot of people that have invested in gold have probably felt that the first time that they did invest in gold.
Yeah,
they've probably had the same or similar kind of feeling. So I'd urge them to try this with Bitcoin too, and just layer on top of your portfolios, whatever it is, investment theses, and think about why you don't have exposure to this financial asset that has been around since 2009 and is still available, is still alive, and you can still be a part of this network that is growing every day. And it's not about that. Yeah, let's close on this. It's not about the price of dollars. It's not about the number go up against Canadian dollars or US dollars or whatever. It's about the amount of people that join the network, which goes up every single day. There's no graph on that I've found, but every day that is just straight up more people on the network. That will never go down. And if more people are joining the network every single day, what's that going to do to the price? Of course, if more people are buying Bitcoin, that means it's going to be more distributed. There's only a finite amount of them, as we know. So make sure you're part of this as we are venturing into unknown waters and watching history play out in front of our eyes as our civilization is converging on a new medium of exchange, which is digital and scarce. And I think this time in history will be studied for thousands of years to come.
Daniel Prince, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate this. We met briefly once in person. I managed to shake your hand at the Bitcoin conference last year. I wasn't there this year. There was some family stuff that I wanted to be a part of here, and then I didn't go this year, but I'm sure our paths will cross at one of these conferences again. There's a Canadian one actually coming up, the first time ever in Toronto. So I'm really excited about that. But we didn't mention at the beginning, you're also the host of Once Bitten, a Bitcoin podcast. So if you're not familiar with Daniel Prince's podcast, Once Bitten, you can check that out. His book, Choose Life, on Twitter at Princey SOV. What is the SOV? Princey SOV. Have I asked you that before?
What's store of value?
It is store of value. When I wrote it down, I go, I bet it's store of value. I bet it is store of value at Princey Store of Value, SOV, Princey SOV. We will have links in the show notes to all of this. So if you're listening to this while you're driving, we'll have links to all of these things. Daniel, I don't know what to say. Just really appreciate it. You don't know me super well. So to do this and take time to share this, really, really appreciate it. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for the podcast episodes that you're putting out. Thank you just for what you're doing and how you're impacting all of us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, mate. Thank you for having me on, and thanks for doing what you do. And I hope the listeners have enjoyed the rip today.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Terms show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.